So there was another attack on our power grid just within the last week, but the media remains largely silent. Only alternative media has been willing to cover this incident. So exactly what happened? Now, as I've mentioned in several previous videos on the subject, I promise not to be the channel that only discusses this issue to the exclusion of all else, but I think our power grid is far more important than most people realize, and we tend to kind of take it for granted. We all do. The people and the facilities that keep it running tend to do so without fanfare or much attention. And the only time we really think about it is when the power goes out during a storm for a few days or hours. Maybe we think about it when we get our power bill. However, we generally take it for granted, which is great, but as I mentioned before, it appears there are a distressingly large number of crazies who are out there willing to physically make the effort to destroy our power grid. So let's talk about the most recent attack. Now, last week, while I was discussing the fact that we caught the two criminal geniuses who took down 4 power substations south of Tacoma so they could rob a local business cash box without getting caught, it turns out that a more ideological attack was made on a major power transformer outside of Las Vegas at the mega solar array facility out in the desert there. Now, whether you love solar power or you believe it's a waste doesn't really matter. Unlike the Pacific Northwest where I live, there's lots of sun in Nevada and most of the time, and of course some major solar power projects have been installed and they're currently being constructed, including this mega solar array, which appears to be designed to provide power specifically to a variety of properties on the Las Vegas Strip. Now, the attack itself was a homegrown act of low-cost kind of incompetence, although as we saw in the recent Tacoma examples, you don't need to be a genius or have a lot of resources to do a substantial amount of damage. In this recent Las Vegas attack, it appears that a guy named Mohammed Mesmerian, a 34-year-old, decided to save the future by breaking into the facility by ramming the gates and then driving his Toyota Camry next to a transformer, spraying gas on the transformer, and then setting his vehicle on fire for good measure. It wasn't a real car bomb, but it was an attempt to use the burning vehicle as part of the attack. Now, he was later arrested at a campground, and despite his Keystone Cop-style attack, he appears to have actually caused enough damage to the transformer, which fortunately wasn't yet online, but it still causes a multi-year delay in finalizing this part of the power grid facility. Now, I have a photo of what I believe is kind of a similar transformer being delivered to a solar panel facility in Australia. It's right here. Now, notice that it takes a semi-truck to deliver it. And these are major pieces of equipment and not simple to manufacture at this scale. And remember how I discussed in the previous videos the problems with the supply chain. And yes, when a goofball like this can do enough damage with just a marginal attack like this one, can essentially take a transformer like this out for years, we really do have a serious problem, and it's a real risk. The tame media is largely ignoring this story. Now, why? Well, mainly in their kind of groupthink world, it isn't really worth reporting on anything that doesn't fit the narrative that they've been directed apparently to push, which is that all the world's problems are caused by Trump and secret white supremacists out there. And this is why when an attack on the power grid in Las Vegas a year ago was imagined by some so-called right-wing extremists, and those idiots were arrested before they could even get as far down the path as this Muhammad guy, it made national news. See this CNN article. I mean, they wrote about it and it hadn't even happened. And I've also linked to some of those stories down below. The tame media is just kind of desperate for every story to conform to their narrative, and at the same time, they ignore the truth, narrative or not. But that doesn't really help us at all. So when an actual attack destroys a massive amount of infrastructure, millions of dollars, and delays the ability to provide power for years, well, that story, of course, is ignored. And this is part of what concerns me about this subject in general. It shouldn't matter which group of clowns, criminals, or nuts decide to destroy the power grid. We should be taking serious steps to harden the grid, fix our manufacturing supply, the whole supply chain in this area, and then build in some kind of redundancy to the system. And, of course, always be personally prepared. It is just egregious that people who pretend to be journalists decide to ignore serious things like this just because the flavor of the guy destroying the power grid doesn't fit the narrative that they've been instructed to report. The result of the attack is essentially the same, and our corporate groupthink media does no favors when they just ignore reality. So anyway, I wanted to just remind my viewers that let them know about this attack and let them know that I'm going to be paying attention to this issue because our media probably isn't going to report on it, or at least they're only going to partly report on it if they do. I believe it matters. So feel free to let me know if you believe I've missed something in the comments section below. Don't forget to subscribe or share with others, and thank you so much for watching.